Today I want to talk about a subject that I probably first thought of 30, 40 years ago when I was just getting, that wasn't that long ago, I was just getting into the workforce, maybe 30 years ago, and I was noticing difference of people. And so let me give a definition of givers and takers. Givers approach life determining what they contribute or give to others. Success is determined by what they give. Takers approach life determining what they can get from others and from life. Success is determined by what you get. The question I want to explore with you today is which approach leads to greater satisfaction and happiness. First, let's explore the case to be a taker. And I've explored a lot of what I would call modern proverbs or wisdom about being a taker. Some things that we were taught as children. You all know this one. Finders, keepers, losers, weepers. Or star bright, starlight, first star I see tonight, I wish I may, I wish I might, have the wish I wish tonight. Or the concept of a genie in a bottle that gives us wishes. Or another element that has some truth to it, but that the early bird gets the worm. As young people, we're told about the environment we're about to enter. Things like it's a dog-eat-dog world. Or it's a jungle out there. Only the strongest will survive, or survival of the fittest. Or the concept of try to get things for free, or free is a very good price. As adults, we're told, take what life gives you. Stand up for yourself. Life is for the taking. You have to fight for everything you get. You aren't going to let them take advantage of you, are you? Get paid more than you're worth. You deserve it. One of the favorite ones, he who dies with the most toys wins. And winning is the only thing. And beyond these sort of what you might call modern proverbs or sayings or things that probably we can all relate to, that we've heard many of those as we've been growing up and as adults, are those thoughts that I think come to me sometimes when you're faced with an issue of, should I take something that maybe isn't totally mine, or how should I handle this? Thoughts such as nobody is going to know. Or perhaps one when someone asks you to do something you really don't want to do. It's not my job. I know we've all heard that, and maybe some of us have said it. We've certainly all thought of it. Or a thought of, I'm going to get mine. Again, that idea that I deserve it. Life's not fair, and I'm going to get what I deserve. The basic premise of those who propose a taker attitude is that the world is out to get you, and you have to stand up for yourself to get everything you deserve. It is a common teaching in our modern world, as demonstrated by these sayings and what you might call modern proverbs. Givers, on the other hand, take a different approach, and I have to admit, I was not able to find very many modern proverbs or sayings. There's some that were taught, let others go first, which is really not a concept of totally giving because we go second. Or the one we are taught as children, take your turn. Another modern saying we have about someone who is a giver is, he'll give you the shirt off his back. I found some sayings, though, that do come, and we use them in our modern talk, but come from many times ago, many years ago, centuries ago. It is more blessed to give than receive. Or the old version of he'll give you the shirt off his back, if someone asks you for your cloak, give him your tunic as well. Or finally, the golden rule, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. However, the majority of modern wisdom, and even some ancient wisdom, although I find more of those things that have come down through history have been more in the attitude of the giver, suggest that we're better off as takers than givers. Another word for givers might be patsies. Well, I want to explore what this modern wisdom says and what our behavior is. First, it seems that modern wisdom matches our behavior. While the United States is the most generous country in the world in giving at $260 billion and gives more money as a percent of income or GDP than any other country in the world by a significant amount, it's still only 2.2% of our income, or 1.8% of GDP. In terms of volunteering, the Department of Labor traces these things, and only 29% of the population, less than a third, between the ages of 16 on up to full adulthood, volunteer. Now, that's interesting as you get into some of these statistics. Women volunteer more than men. 32% of the women volunteer, 25% of the men. The highest age period when people volunteer is 35 to 44. You know, a lot of the folks as I look around in this room are in that age demographic. Volunteering starts out slower, peaks there, and then goes down. Interestingly, volunteerism goes up with education. Of college graduates, 46% volunteer. People who are employed volunteer more at 31% than those that are unemployed at 26%. In terms of states, it's vastly different. Again, the national average is 29%. Oregon is number 17 in the list of states at 33%. Our state to the north of us, Washington, is number 11 at 38%. And who can guess who the number one state is for volunteerism? Anyone have a guess? Utah at 50%. The U.S. is one of the top volunteering countries in the world. They actually rank about 8 in some of the studies I found. But they come nowhere close to Norway. Again, U.S. is at 29%. Norway's at 52%. Now again, we're talking about any volunteer activity during a year, so it would be easy to see how you could get to 50%, like our own state of Utah has gotten to that level. So as you think about the modern wisdom that I shared with you, some of the things that I know all of us have heard time and time again, and these statistics, I have some questions for you to ponder as I go through the kind of second half of my talk this morning. Would you rather work with a giver or a taker? Would you rather live next to a giver or a taker? Would you rather marry a giver or a taker? And finally, the most personal answer that we'll get to at the end of the talk, would you rather be a giver or a taker? Well, as you're contemplating these questions, let's examine some modern research and see what they have to, because clearly modern wisdom, modern behavior really resonates on the side that adopting a taker attitude is the way to succeed. Well, in a recent study in Science, reported in Science magazine, researchers looked at the amount of happiness, the satisfaction level, and related it to income. Interestingly, they found when personal income exceeds $12,000, not a large sum by any means, in fact some people would say a very low sum, certainly a poverty sum, satisfaction levels do not increase with income. So someone at 12,000 and someone at 12 million have the same level of life satisfaction. No evidence. Evidently, when someone is out of poverty, getting more income does not lead to increased satisfaction with life. It's kind of counter to our modern wisdom. In fact, counter to what I think a lot of us believe, that more income and more things are going to increase our satisfaction level. Well, the BBC reported that scientists from the University of Newcastle in Australia went out to examine the impact of materialism and the materialistic approach to life. More of a taker attitude. What can I get? First, the findings suggested that materialistic people judge success or failure on the basis of personal possessions. That's not surprising. That's probably how most of us would say. The more possessions, you know, the comment I had that we have of he with the most toys wins, or she with the most toys wins. But interestingly, they found that materialistic people were more likely to suffer from depression and anger. They were less likely to be satisfied with life. They say, quote, "While the possession of conspicuous goods may be equated with success and seen as a goal in itself, it is associated neither with life satisfaction nor psychological health." So much for the theory that he with the most toys wins. It sounds like maybe he with the most toys may lose. Well, the internet's a wonderful thing, and I bet you didn't know that there is a happiness institute. And you always worry a little bit when you go out on the internet and read things, but there is a Happiness Institute, and it said, rather than being selfish and self-centered, as some common myths, in fact, as I talked about it, maybe common proverbs and misconceptions seem to suggest, happy people are more generous and more altruistic. So a group that set out to determine how to be happy says those that are generous and altruistic. A Dr. Chris Stewart Patterson from British Columbia looked at some research on volunteering, and he concluded that it promotes increased physical and psychological well-being. During and after volunteering, 95% of people report the feelings of warmth and well-being similar to those reported after prolonged exercise. This helper's high, if you will, and maybe some of you have experienced that, may be the result of endorphins released in the brain and could be health promoting. Another interesting part of the research, males who regularly donate blood have reduced incidence of heart attacks. A new way, I guess, to figure out, keep your cholesterol low, get diet, get exercise, and give blood. So modern research seems to suggest some things that ancient philosophers had discovered a long time ago. Democritus, who lived in the 4th century BC, concluded, happiness resides not in possessions and not in gold. The feelings of happiness dwells in the soul. King Solomon said, a generous man will prosper. He who refreshes others will himself be refreshed. So you've got some folks both from a religious and non-religious side of centuries ago echoing this concept that maybe it is a giver rather than a taker who's going to do best in life. Well, I was able to find some modern-day observers of life that agreed with this concept. Reporter Bill Moyer stated, I have found that people of means who are the happiest and most deeply satisfied are those who use their money to empower others. They feel more than lucky. They feel blessed. John Templeton, who was the genius, I guess, or the invested mind behind the Templeton funds, and one of the world's best investors, said, happiness comes from spiritual wealth, not material wealth. Happiness comes from giving, not getting. If we try hard to bring happiness to others, we cannot stop it from coming to us also. To get joy, we must give. To keep joy, we must scatter it. So ancient philosophers, modern research, and some modern observers seem to counter the current wisdom that you can take all you can. Well, does this make sense? I want you all to think about a recent possession that you really wanted. Maybe it was a shirt, maybe it was a car, maybe it was even a house, maybe it was something, a pair of shoes, new bike, whatever the passion was that you really wanted that possession, and then you got it. How long did the thrill last? I recall back in business school, a person who was an entrepreneur came out and said, I'd always wanted a Rolls Royce my entire life. And I finally had enough money to get a Rolls Royce. And I went out and I bought it the first day I was driving down the highway, and I was just on cloud 9. He admitted the thrill lasted a week. So, that's what tends to happen with things. Things we can buy with money generally only offer temporal satisfaction. Now think about the last time that you gave some of your time as a volunteer, some of your skill perhaps as a volunteer in some other way, maybe even some of your money. Was there any satisfaction that you got? Did you get that helper's high that the one researcher spoke of? And did it last? As I think about these things, I wonder if perhaps we were designed to serve, and when we do, we achieve our greatest satisfaction. Recall a time, and I've been, over the last several years, trying to give about a week, a year of my vacation to some sort of volunteer pursuit. And this week was at a high school camp that was with actually houseboats. And my job that week was to drive some ski boats for them and basically serve high school kids. Ate right with them, talked with them, slept. It was quite warm, and While all of us that were driving ski boats could have afforded an air-conditioned houseboat, we didn't have one, so we were sleeping in 80-degree or 70-degree heat or whatever, which is not too comfortable, as you all can imagine. And basically had an entire week that if you had paid me to do it, I don't think you could have come up with enough money. And the interesting thing was at the end of the week, there was something about that I went back to work, and it was just an incredible experience. And it was, the kids were nice. I can't say that I had a tremendous impact on any of them. Maybe I did, maybe I didn't. But just that sense of serving for an entire week in what I considered rather deplorable living conditions really was quite satisfying. And it gets back to that sort of thing. And, and now I can recall that. If you had asked me what was the thing that I bought that summer, I couldn't even tell you what it was. It certainly, if I still have it, it isn't there. A friend once gave me some very good advice about raising children, and I've applied it to myself. He said, give them experiences, not things. And it's certainly been something I've tried to do in my parenting, but I've thought about my own life. Is really what I want, another thing, or there's some experiences, some being volunteer and some being ones in which I'm able to partake of. So what can we give? Well, think about 3 T's, the 3 T's of giving. I guess it should be the 3 G's, but I'm going to use T's. Time, talent, and treasure. Your time, what you could volunteer. Your talent, where do you have skills that you can offer? And your treasure, where can you give your money? Our modern world says to be a taker. And you're going to find a lot of things, advertising, all those sayings, a lot of the teaching that we have out there. But modern research, sage observers, and ancient proverbs show the value in being a giver. The choice of each of ours. If you're like me, though, you may find it difficult to be a giver. Somehow that taker attitude comes on a little bit more. And one of the areas I've found that has really converted my heart and moved me to be more of a giver, because I still take, I will admit that to all of you, and I'm sure all of you do as well. Some of you know me well, so you can verify that, is my relationship with Jesus Christ that has allowed me to move more to a giver. It has had some interesting impacts in my life, and I want to give you a couple of examples. The first is a very trivial example. How many of you get annoyed when people cut you off in traffic? I did. And one day on the way into work, and by the way, those of you that travel a lot know that we have a substantially different culture of driving in the West than you have in the East. Anyone who has driven in Boston or New York, it's just a plain different culture. And here we take turns and we abide by the rules and we don't crowd and we don't honk, and it's really quite civil. But occasionally someone from the East Coast, and I apologize to anyone who has moved here and hasn't converted to our West Coast style of driving, will cut us off and not follow the protocol of taking turns. And these folks used to make me absolutely furious. And while I was boiling up in that road rage sort of an element, one day I sat there fully exhausted with energy of anger, and I thought, that person in that car is not feeling anything. In fact, not only that, they're ahead of me in line. Here I am the one that is suffering, and they're the one that's benefiting. I said, there's something wrong with this. And at that moment, I got this sensation, this feeling, this, not a voice really, but it was, why don't you pray for them? And so since then, anytime anyone has cut me off in line, I have prayed for that person. I've said, God, they clearly need you. They're rude, they're inconsiderate. But I'll tell you what the difference is. Maybe they got a blessing and maybe it changed their life. Of course, these are strangers, so I don't know. But I can tell you what it's done to me. I don't have any road rage anymore. It's kind of hard to be totally angry when you're praying for someone. And it's converted my life in a way, and it also has meant that I now let people in a little bit more than I did before. Second thought. This was a number of years ago, and while these things still happen in businesses today, back in the early 80s, when this occurred, it was a little more common. Our company, the company I worked for, was going through some trouble, and they cut benefits, and then they had across-the-board salary cuts. My personal salary cut was 10%. And when I got that salary cut, I said, well, they're paying me less, they're giving me less benefits, I guess I'll just work less, right? That's a fair sort of a thing. They're not going to give me as much, I'm not going to give as much. And I thought a little bit about that and read a little bit about that, and something came to me. And I said, you know, there's another approach I can take to this. I can try to be the most underpaid person in the company. And if I am the most underpaid person in the company, two things will likely happen. One, I will be the last one laid off. And two, I will likely be the first one to have their salary raised back. Makes sense, because why would anyone not want to do that to the most underpaid person in the company? And so rather than working less when that, I actually worked more. 6 months later, I was promoted. My salary was restored to the prior level. I can't say it was all because of that attitude, but it certainly gave me a different attitude around that. And I would encourage some of you to think through that process. It's also been kind of an attitude I've had as I've worked since then, is to really try to be the most underpaid person in the company. In my job right now, I am blessed with a very large salary, and it is very difficult to be the most underpaid person in the company. So it is getting more challenging as years go on. Finally, I have to say that my faith has impacted my financial giving and my volunteerism. I really do try to look at opportunities where I can give my time, you know, in a simple example like giving some of my vacation up to drive ski boats and serve kids for a week, or volunteering at some of the organizations you heard about, even volunteering here this morning. Talent, in terms of whether I can bring some of the skill I've got from financial areas or others. I've got very fascinated, involved with microenterprise, and been overseas multiple times in doing that, using some of my knowledge about finance and banking to help folks that are in a little bit more of a need, as well as my money in terms of being able to give. And I can tell you that while there's been a lot of things that I have gotten that I've been dissatisfied with, the number of times that I've given my time, talent, and money and say, that was a poor investment, are very few. So I bring you a modern philosophy, and that modern philosophy is, life is for the taking. Take what you can, you deserve it. Or an ancient philosophy, it's better to give than receive. And I leave it for you this morning to think about in your own life and those around you. Do you want to be a giver, or do you want to be a taker? Thank you very much. I'm open for some questions. I think we have a couple of minutes here until we need to move on. Yes?
So for the people that weren't here this morning, how do we communicate to them how beneficial it is, how much pleasure you can get, particularly out of donating your time, because people always seem to think that they're too busy to volunteer to do anything. How do we communicate that to people? How do we get them interested? I mean, have you found any secrets to that?
Well, a couple of things. One is, I think, just, you know, I'm a person, when you're exploring sensitive topics like that, because I think it's better with questions. I even ask you some questions. Now, those questions may have been rhetorical. They didn't need to be, all right, because, you know, they do it. So I would explore them in some questions. The second thing is, it is, I think, very difficult for someone to think about giving up a week of their vacation or even a day of their vacation first. And so I would encourage, if you want to try to get someone involved in this, baby steps. You know, take a very easy approach to volunteering that might be available. There's a number of them in our community. You know, we got beach cleanups. You know, you could say, hey, do you want to come along with me for a day and help clean up the beach? Again, how could anyone complain about cleaning up the beach? All of us would like to have a cleaner beach. There are opportunities to go out and serve with Habitat for Humanity for a day and wield a hammer and, or do something else. Single day, no commitment, nothing else, just try it. There are opportunities in a lot of organizations around where it's just a single day. With this group, you know, volunteer to help one morning, set up, get here a little bit early. I mean, you can find a lot of spots to volunteer, and I would just say try it and see if you like it. You know, if it's pouring rain at the beach and it's miserable and you still have a good day, something's strange about that, right? That's probably how I would choose to try to get people involved. And if any of you are kind of saying, you know, I don't have the time to do it, as you could tell from the research, it's not a matter of time. The people that are the busiest, I would say the 35 to 44-year-old period is probably the busiest period in life. Certainly much more busy than someone who's retired or even someone that is in their high school years. So I would say that's it. The other thing is, those of you that are parents, I encourage you to start volunteering early. Some of my most memorable volunteer experiences was when I was in high school. I don't know exactly why I did. I don't know what my parents, they wouldn't have told me to do that because that wasn't the way I was raised, but I think maybe by their example, I saw them doing it, so I did it too. So you can start quite early, even at younger ages than that. So I think those are some things I would encourage people to think about to get that, because I do believe that once you start doing that, you know, it's a little inconvenience. It's always easier to sit on the couch and not do anything, but when you do it, you say, hey, that was satisfying. That was fun.
So Jeff, do you take time to take care of yourself? And if so, what do you like to do? And how do you find time to schedule that in?
You know, the other talk I gave to this group was a talk about balance, and I look across 4 areas of balance. The head, the heart, the body, and the soul, all right? Or the mental, physical, I didn't give these in the same order, spiritual, and emotional. And I do try to do all of those. So the things where I try to take time is I exercise regularly. I try to deal with the spiritual side of my life on a regular basis, reading on a daily basis. I really try to focus on the emotional side. My big weakness in terms of my time is if someone wants to talk to me, I always will talk to them, and then that sometimes means those wonderful emails that we get at such a regular basis throughout the day. You got to catch up on some of that. So those are the sort of things I try to do to balance out, and unfortunately, I'm like probably all of you. I don't do a perfect job of that. So, I mean, I love the outdoors. I love to recreate. I thoroughly enjoy time with my wife, my 3 children. This last weekend, for example, I was in New York City with my parents, visiting my older son with my wife. You know, those are the things I try to do to recreate. Lots of them. While I don't think life is for the taking, I think life is for the living, and you have to do that with some purpose to maximize it. We only have a very few days, and if they're not to be wasted. Wow. Oh, yes.
You mentioned micro-enterprise. Could you explain a little bit what you mean by that?
Sure. Micro-enterprise is the providing of very, very small loans to people who are unable to get loans at all. It's done principally in third world countries, but there's programs here in the United States. These loans can be as small as $50 to $100. The majority of them would be lent to women. Probably about 2/3 are to women. And these are to people who have no collateral. And so there's techniques that have been developed to, create repayment rates. The repayment rates are in the worldwide are in the 97% plus rate. That's higher than the repayment rate on credit cards. So the concept that you can't lend to the poor is inaccurate. And the impact for the person and the family that are able to get these small loans, putting them into a business where, like any economic model, where you have a low amount of capital and a high amount of labor. Small amounts of capital really increase the efficiency of the labor. They're able to pay what we would think would be very high interest rates, 20, 30% a year, but still they think the money is almost free because the money lender in town might be charging 2,000% a year. And the impacts on being able for people to work their way through enterprise and industrialness out of poverty to provide for their family, to get their kids in school, has just had a profound effect. And it's something that I think has been both very interesting to me as an economics student and someone who works in the finance industry, and also gratifying as I've seen these programs around the world and see money that I've donated and time in terms of working with some of the programs really expand people's world, and allows them to do it not where it's, necessarily giving them aid, which I think is very appropriate in a lot of situations, but giving them something that allows them to lever up their lives and their businesses. So that's a 90-second to 120-second version of it. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the time. I am going to have to leave right here. I got a 9 o'clock flight this morning, but I will be around for a couple of minutes. And 7:30, though, I'm out the door, and I apologize if I'm rude to anyone by doing that. Thank you.